Today is a grey and rainy June day here by the sea in southern England. The kind of weather that makes me think of home. The windows of our old Victorian house are rattling in the wind. I have a warm cup of coffee beside me, and somehow it feels like the right moment to finally begin telling these stories. Hello and welcome to the Rootsong Studio podcast. My name is Enni, and before we begin exploring folklore, mythology, storytelling, and all the strange and beautiful things we'll encounter together, I thought I should start by telling you where my own love for stories comes from. When people ask why I'm drawn to folklore, they often assume it began with books. And yes, I do love books. But the truth is that long before I read folklore, I lived in it. I grew up in Finland, surrounded by people who blurred the line between stories and reality so completely that I never really learned to separate them. Few people in my life have inspired me so completely that my imagination is full of characters and their adventures. The first person I want to introduce is my grandfather, Lauri. Whenever my siblings, cousins, and I gathered together to sleep on mattresses laid around my grandfather's bed, he would invent bedtime stories entirely on the spot. No preparation, no notes, no hesitation. Our favourite series followed an unnamed Native American boy who, against all logic and probability, discovered a kangaroo in the middle of the prairie. The kangaroo introduced himself as Katapultti. Together, Katapultti, the kangaroo, and the boy raced wild horses, hunted with bows and arrows, crossed impossible landscapes, explored, and survived one outrageous adventure after another. I do not remember every story. What I remember is the feeling, the certainty that absolutely anything could happen next, the understanding that stories didn't need permission to be magical. They simply were just that, magical. Another great influence was my other grandfather, Risto. Where Lauri taught me imagination, Risto taught me that the world itself was full of stories. He took me deep into the forests of Kainuu and taught me how to read them. He showed me which berries could be eaten and which would make you ill. He taught me about mushrooms and plants. He showed me how to make fire in the woods without equipment. He told me what to do if I ever came across a brown bear or a lone wolf. He taught me how to find east from the position of an ant nest beside a tree. And in case I ever did get lost during my woodland adventures, he taught me how to find my way home at night by looking at the sky and following the stars. These weren't stories in the usual sense. They were knowledge. But in Finland, especially in the rural areas, practical knowledge and folklore often walk hand in hand. There was another reason why my time with Risto felt connected to folklore. He came from a long line of noita and tietäjät. These words are often translated as witches, shamans, or wise folk, but none of those translations fully capture what they meant in Finnish, Sami, and Karelian tradition. A tietäjä was a keeper of knowledge. someone who carried old songs, healing traditions, charms, stories, and ways of understanding both the seen and the unseen worlds. As a child, I simply knew this as part of my grandfather's family history. Only later did I understand how deeply that history connected to the Finnish folklore itself. One of Risto's ancestors was the renowned tietäjä and runo-singer Smötkyn Riiko, also known as Riiko Kallio, Grigori Kalliev, and later also Enni Tapionkaski. He was born in Pirttilahti in Vienna, Karelia on Christmas Eve in 1869, and he became known as one of the region's great sages and singers of traditional runo songs. Those runo songs form the foundation of the Kalevala, Finland's national epic. For those unfamiliar with it, the Kalevala is a collection of ancient poems and stories gathered together in the 19th century from oral traditions across Finland and Karelia. It tells stories of creation, magic, fate, heroes, spirits, loss, love, and humanity's relationship with the natural world. Kalevala was one of the pieces to inspire Tolkien himself to study Finnish language and to write the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Unlike many famous epics, Kalevala wasn't exactly written by a single author. It emerged from countless singers and storytellers who carried these stories in their memories and passed them from one generation to the next. At the heart of many of these tales stands Väinämöinen, not a conquering king, not a warrior, but a singer, a sage, a keeper of knowledge whose greatest power comes from words, memory, and song. When I learned more about Smötkyn Riiko, I began to understand why the Kalevala had always felt so strangely familiar. The people who carried these traditions weren't distant historical figures trapped inside books. They were real people. People who walked forests, people who knew the stars, people who sang stories into the world. One of the things I find most moving is that Smötkyn Riiko didn't only preserve old stories. He also left behind his own vision of one of the greatest mysteries in Finnish mythology, Sampo. If you've never encountered it before, the Sampo is a strange object at the center of many Kalevala stories. It is forged by the legendary smith Ilmarinen and becomes a source of immense prosperity and abundance. Yet nobody entirely agrees on what the Sampo actually is. Some describe it as a magical mill, others as a cosmic machine, a world pillar, a symbol of fortune, a symbol of creation itself. The mystery remains unsolved, and yet Smötkyn Riiko drew a picture of it. His version resembles an intriguing machine with wheels, handles, legs, and an opening through which prosperity could emerge into the world. I often think about that drawing, not because it solves the mystery, but because it reminds me that folklore was never set to stone. Every singer imagined these stories differently. Every storyteller carried their own version. The Kalevala wasn't born from a single imagination. It was born from thousands. And somewhere among those voices was one of my family ancestors sketching his version of mythic object that nobody has ever fully explained. One day in the early autumn, my grandfather, Risto, told me there was a troll forest a little drive away from his house. Finland's forests and lands are full of rocks of enormous and smaller sizes as a reminder of the Ice Age. On that day, Risto took me to a place where there were big boulders laying on the forest floor. There must have been at least 20 of them nearby each other. What Risto pointed out to me was that the moss growing on them looked completely different from those on the surrounding rocks and stones in the area. I asked him why. He told me these weren't ordinary rocks. These were trolls. They turned to stone during the day and returned to their true forms at nightfall. I believed him completely. And honestly, part of me still wants to. Looking back now, I think those forests became the first worlds I ever truly belonged to. As a child, I spent most of my days outdoors with my dogs, running through the woods for hours at a time, inventing stories as I went. I filled notebook after notebook with them. I drew comics. I made maps. I created strange little worlds populated by those trolls, foxes, dragons and griffins, mythical horses, pirates, magical herbs, and portals between dimensions. Some stories were funny. Some were adventurous. Some were darker and stranger than I probably realized at the time. But they all felt real to me. Those forests around me were never just forests. They were landscapes waiting for stories to happen inside them. One of my greatest treasures was my grandmother, Helga, and her old tarot deck. When Grandma introduced the deck of cards to me, I became completely fascinated by the images. I would spread the cards across the floor and create comic book-like sequences from them. The Knight of Pentacles would go on a journey. The Hermit would be his wise teacher. The Knight would get trapped by the devil. The Nine of Wands would show the knight's exhaustion under the devil's enslavement. I invented these stories and wrote entire adventures inspired by the strange images. Looking back, I think tarot taught me something incredibly important very early on. Symbols carry stories. And stories carry meaning far beyond words themselves. Long before I understood mythology academically, I understood instinctively that images, archetypes, and old stories could speak directly to something deep inside me. Perhaps that is why I still feel drawn to folklore, fairy tales, and mythology today. To me, they have never felt separate from one another. They all belong to the same vast storytelling tradition. I want to tell you more about my dear Grandma Helga and her fiancé, my step-grandfather Jussi. Every summer I visited their lakeside cottage in Kainuu. Midsummer was always the highlight of my summer holidays. Late in the evening of midsummer's nightless night, when the sun doesn't set, the men in our group would be ushered into the cottage and instructed to shut the curtains. The women and girls, my great-grandmother Lisa, Grandma Helka, my great-aunties, and few cousins gathered for a midnight sauna. We sang. We shared stories. Afterwards, we weaved flower crowns with wild flowers and danced around the big bonfire naked to lure the harmful spirits into the dance with us. The spirits would have to keep dancing as long as the fire was burning. Only then they would be too tired to cause harm till next year. After, we would jump into the still lake to wash off the smoke from our hair. We also blessed the potato fields and crops with beer and songs. We practiced traditions that had been handed down through generations. Some people might call it folklore. To us, it was simply what we did. One of those traditions involved leaving offerings to the väki of the forest. The word väki is difficult to translate. It can mean people, power, spirits, or the unseen presence that inhabits a place. We left fish, porridge, sausages, cloudberry jam, whatever we had to spare. Every morning the offering plate by the back corner of our cottage would be empty. Jussi insisted that a great white camel lived in the woods and came every night to eat the offerings. Even as a child, I found this really difficult to believe. A camel in the forests of Kainuu. Naturally, driven by my curiosity, one night I decided to find out. I woke around 2 in the morning, grabbed a disposable camera and slipped outside. The offering plate was still full. I sat down on the steps of our outdoor toilet and waited, and waited, and waited. Eventually, a pine marten appeared. This beautiful, shy creature emerged from behind the berry bushes and approached the offering plate. It looked directly at me. Then it began to eat the fish and porridge. I had never seen one before, and I have never seen one since. My camera was ready the entire time, but I never took the photograph. When the morning came, I went to find Jussi. I saw the great white camel, I told him. Oh, did you now? He asked with a hint of disbelief. Yes, I confirmed with certainty. It was so brilliantly white it was almost glowing. I didn't want him to be disappointed. After all, he believed in the great white camel so completely. Looking back now, I think these memories explain almost everything about why I love folklore. Folklore isn't just stories. It's relationships. It's how people understand the land around them. It's practical knowledge mixed with imagination. It's knowing how to navigate by the stars while also believing that the trolls sleep in the woods under their moss blankets. It's leaving offerings for unseen beings while understanding that a pine marten might be the one who receives them. It's a world where magic and reality don't compete with one another. They coexist. And perhaps that is what I want this Rootsong Studio podcast to be about. Not proving whether stories are true, but exploring why they matter. Because stories shape how we see ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And if you're listening to this podcast, I suspect they matter to you too. Thank you for joining me for this first episode. In future episodes, we'll explore folklore, myths, fairy tales, storytelling, and the strange places where they overlap. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed meeting some of the people who told me stories and taught me how to see the world through them. Until next time, keep listening for the stories hidden in the roots, carried on the wind as a song, and written within starlight. Goodbye for now.